Hey everybody, we're going to use deductive reasoning to draw conclusions. Now, we've already talked about something called, let me get to it, inductive reasoning. And inductive reasoning is just like reasoning based off of your assumptions or your patterns. And sometimes you have a lot of information, sometimes you don't. But deductive reasoning is instead of you thinking of what the pattern is and coming up with it all by yourself, it's like I'm giving you the pattern. So the way to make this deductive reasoning is I said, okay, 2, what comes next? You're going to multiply by 2. 4, 8, 16, okay? So I'm telling you what to do. That's deductive reasoning. And then you're just finding the next term. So if you can title your next 2 pages Deductive Reasoning, we're going to use our concept of conditional statements, if-then sentences, in order to do deductive reasoning. It'll just make it a little easier. So deductive reasoning, again, it's reasoning using those facts, definitions, knowledge, not just making assumptions based on patterns. Okay, so let's practice this concept. If you score 90 or above on a test, then you earn an A. And then I say Daniel scored a 92 on the test. What can we deduce? What can we conclude? What can we imply? So we're going to use our deductive reasoning. Hopefully you all came to the conclusion that Daniel scored an A on the test. A bad conclusion would be Daniel cheated, or Daniel scored a B, or Daniel skipped school, or anything like that, right? Deductive reasoning is only using this sentence and this sentence alone to help us. And since this right here was the first part of the sentence, we can conclude some stuff. We can conclude the ending of the sentence. And that's an example in deductive reasoning called the law of detachment. So the law of detachment states basically, if you have a conditional sentence, so P to Q, and then you have P, you have the hypothesis, then we can assume just the conclusion is true. We can jump to the conclusion. Okay, it doesn't work the other way around. Like this wouldn't work if I said, if you make an, if you score 90 or above on the test, then you earn an A. And then if I said Daniel earned an A, it doesn't mean he scored a 90 or above on the test. Like he could have scored an 89 and I bumped it up to an A. Okay, so here's an example. If you finish your homework on time, then you pass. And then I say Marcy finished her homework on time. Well, what can we conclude? Well, since we have a conditional statement and then we have the hypothesis happening, we can conclude the conclusion that she passed. Okay. Here's another one. If you have a license, then you can drive. Danielle has a license. What can you conclude? Again, that's the hypothesis going on, right? So I can conclude that Danielle can drive. Okay, here's another one. If you get paid, then you go to the movies. If you go to the movies, you eat popcorn. The comma implies a then. It's okay. Sarah got paid. So what can we conclude? Well, let's see. She got paid, so we can conclude she goes to the movies. But right here it says movies, so they link. So I'm going to ignore it since it links. So if you get paid, I can conclude Sarah ate popcorn, and that is true. If I go to the movies, I'm going to have some popcorn. Okay. So those are some examples. I think I have some more. Right here, if you are tired, then you go to sleep. Mrs. Roberts is tired, so Mrs. Roberts went to sleep or goes to sleep. Okay, so remember, it is unlawful not to follow the law of detachment. Okay. The next law and the last law is the law of syllogism. The law of syllogism states, it's like the transitive property. It states that basically we have those linking sentences like I had on that last example where I crossed them off. So if you have linking sentences, if the conclusion of the first sentence becomes the hypothesis of the next sentence, we can just cancel them out and simplify that sentence. So here's my example. if you do your homework on time, then you pass. If you pass, then you are happy. Okay, so you notice how this one ends with you passing, this one starts with you passing. So that's my cues. Okay, that's my cue statements are the same, they link. So the law of syllogism says that we can just cancel out those linking parts, and then we can just simplify the sentence to, if you do your homework on time, then you are happy. And I think that's true, because you don't feel the stress if you do your homework on time. But we'll worry about the truth value a little bit later. This is just using the laws on the sentences. Okay, so let's practice this. If you get paid, then you go to the movies. If you go to the movies, you eat popcorn. So I kind of did this example before, but we used the law of detachment on it. Now we're going to use the law of syllogism. So the law of syllogism, is when they link about going to the movies. So I'm going to cancel that out. So the law of syllogism in this case would be, if you get paid, then you eat popcorn. The law of detachment would just be, you eat popcorn. Okay, here we go. If you are tired, then you go to sleep. If you go to sleep, then you wake up. So if you're tired, let's say, what can I cross out? The part that repeats. So if you're tired, then you wake up. Okay, so remember, syllogism, it's the law. Hopefully this little recap helped you. If you have any questions, come talk to me.